Now, I'm saying a lot of people liked it, but it's a double-edged sword because it comes with tons of security risks because it has access to everything, to your computer, to your browser, and this is really dangerous. And actually, I'm surprised that we didn't hear on Twitter about anybody getting hacked through Claude Code yet. So,
as we all know, we saw that OpenClaw just shattered the metrics for the fastest growing GitHub repo out there. And just like that, right, people started giving their digital lives to all these AI agents. That's why I wanted to talk today with Ed and Marco. He's a fellow Googler. He's my go-to person when it comes to actually understanding and moving away all the noise when it comes to these AI agents. He's passionate about AI agents, passionate about open source, but most importantly, his background is in security. We talk about how the AI space is really changing the way open source is being written, how to best secure AI applications, and then also some of the things that he's most excited about in 2026. As always, I am your host, Abe, and let's have a conversation with Ed and Marco. Hey, Eden, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, Abe? Thanks so much for inviting me. Super nice.
You know, as you know, right, you're my go-to person at Google when it comes to really knowing AI, things like LangChain. But before we dive in, right, I think it's fair to say that, you know, this is going to be a conversation not related to our employer, right? These are opinions of our own. It's just really an open space for us to just talk about nerdy things.
Yeah, totally down with that.
I'm really interested of your background, how you went from sort of a security-focused backend engineer and became an AI specialist at Google. But before that, I think what's more important to know is, what is your take on Claudebot? It sort of just went from like 0 to 100 in over the weekend on Twitter.
So at first, when seeing the open source, I was like thinking, what's so useful about it? I mean, it's just a bunch of connectors to WhatsApp or to Telegram that operates Claude Code under the hood. But the more I learned about it and tried it out and tested it, it really solves the problem where you want to do useful things with AI agents. And for most of AI agents today, at least at the landscape, in every vendor, the problem is it doesn't have access to your personal information, to the good and to the bad. So if you want to do something on your Facebook or on your LinkedIn or on Twitter, so you would need to default to, plug in with their API, maybe via MCP. But the point here, a lot of the useful stuff and the useful work that we do is on the desktop. So it's going to a browser, going to a website where our credentials are already logged in, and we can go and we can use it. So I think this is what really made it useful and a lot of people liked. Now, I'm saying a lot of people liked it, but it's a double-edged sword because it comes with tons of security risks because it has access to everything, to your computer, to your browser where you're logged in. And this is really dangerous. And, there's tons of, MCPs and skills, which are double-edged sword because it comes with tons of security risks because it has access to everything, to your computer, to your browser where you're logged in. And this is really dangerous. And, there's tons of, MCPs and skills, which are literally remote code execution. So it also adds lots of security concerns. And actually, I'm surprised that we didn't hear on Twitter about anybody getting hacked through Claude Code yet.
Right. And it's changing so quick, right? The name went from Moltbot. What is it? Claudebot to now
Claudebot to Moltbot. Yeah, to OpenClaw.
Yeah, to OpenClaw. And for someone that maybe doesn't come from a security background, what are the things that they can do to protect themselves if they want to play with this?
So I think right now, by the way, there are many wrappers around OpenClaw that solve some of these problems. So for example, I think you can now run it inside a container, which doesn't have access to much, but it's not that as useful as it does. So I think I think the first thing is to first be aware of the process which is running on your computer, and to be able to go and shut it down.
Yeah.
And yeah, I personally will go and give him entire access to my computer, simply because it has the entire access to my computer, and you don't know what can happen.
Hmm.
But there are many solutions that can help you, narrow the domain and narrow the scope of what CloudBot can do. And in fact, I think when you initialize it, you do have a lot of configuration choices. So you can
Hmm.
control what it can, it cannot. But I think out of the box, when most people go and download it and run it, it's simply a privileged process which is running on the computer.
Yeah, I guess it's easy to forget that you as the user, right, in your computer you have God mode, and if you default that same access to OpenClaw, right, there's a lot of risk there. Almost, I guess you're almost saying treat it like if you're handing your computer to a friend or just someone, right? You're probably not going to want them to have access to everything.
Exactly, exactly.
And I am curious because I know I think we've met in 2023 or 2024. And one thing I've always admired of you is your willingness to like understand open source technology and specifically LangChain, right? When it first came out, you're like one of the first people that really were looking at it in both the positive and negative and trying to understand, is this useful, right? Can this be applied? Is it production ready? I am curious, like now seeing the growth that LangChain has had over the last 3 years, what are some things that you're seeing similar with like OpenClaw that, you compare with LangChain?
So first of all, just a quick disclaimer: I'm a very big fan of LangChain,
Yeah.
and I really admire the people there, and I think they're the ones who have a
Hmm.
huge role in pushing this industry and on pounding on innovation and getting out new stuff
Hmm.
right out of the research labs. So this is just a quick disclaimer. So I wouldn't compare OpenClaw to LangChain, although I think it was much more viral than
Yeah.
LangChain was when it came out.
Which is crazy to
And I
say because
think,
LangChain was considered very viral at its time, but now that
yes,
definition has changed so much with OpenClaw.
yeah, this hockey stick of the
Yeah.
GitHub stars. You can I think I saw on X post comparing those two. Um, so I think the reason for why it became so viral was because when OpenClaw came out, a lot of people in the industry, including not so techie folks,
Hmm.
uh, knew much more about agents and about AI applications than when LangChain came out. So I was
Mm.
just talking to my dad a couple of days ago. So he's around 65 years old, and he knows what are agents, so and he understands them, so this is something which were 2 years ago. Go try to explain to a person who, and by the way,
Yeah.
he's a non-programmer, to a non-programmer, what's an AI agent, right? So I think the vast population right now are much more mature as far as market education. Okay, and
Hmm.
when OpenClaw came out, it was really solving a pain point where people wanted to do useful things with the agent, and to do useful things, you have to give it access to your stuff.
Yeah.
And when LangChain came out, and when LangChain came out, there was just API of I think it was in that point of time it was OpenAI to make API calls to GPT 3.5. That's pretty much it. So when LangChain came out, there wasn't at all market education. People didn't know what are agents, what is RAG back then. So it wasn't really common. And it was, for a really close group of, early adapters.
Yeah. No, like that resonates because I work with a lot of startups, and One thing that I think it's always hard for founders to realize is that timing is so important, right? LangChain launched 1 month before ChatGPT was launched by OpenAI. So there wasn't really this strong appetite of large language model orchestration, right? There wasn't a lot of companies doing it. So I feel LangChain just was at the right place at the right time. But credits to them is that they've moved with the market as needed, right, in the last 3-4 years now. And I think you're right with OpenClaw. Now everyone knows or has a definition in their head of what an AI agent was. I remember 2023, people were understanding what the phrase generative AI meant. What do you think is the things that OpenClaw needs to do, right, to sort of get that sort of clearance, right, from someone that's security minded, or to sort of grade it as like production ready? What are the steps that you think they're maybe already taking that you're seeing?
So I think that there is a difference when you say production ready to when comparing things like OpenClaw to frameworks like LangChain, because LangChain is to help developers build AI applications and to go and to building, for example, a company in the enterprise want to build a chatbot or an agent that does X, Y, and Z. So LangChain gives you the tools with LangChain, LangGraph, LangSmith, and now Deep Agents, their agent harness. So they help the builders build those AI systems, those agent systems, multi-agent system. While OpenClaw, it is really for the end user to start doing things with an AI agent. So it's pretty much an AI harness on top of Claude Code, which is, it can be used for coding and for building things, but the usage is much more general. So to create automations and to perform your everyday tasks, like a normal coworker you would work with. So I think like when we say production ready for OpenClaw, is like, okay, so when will organization will let their employees run it on or their machine? You mean like this, like this?
Yeah. Or, I guess that's a good point, right? Like OpenClaw is right now, obviously there's a lot of attraction. I am curious what you think is its path to maturity. Like, what are the things that OpenClaw has to do today to really get more mass adoption?
So I think it's also a problem. I think first of all there is the issue of privileges, of what do you give OpenClaw on the onboarding, and as far as the enterprises and the organizations tooling for their security posture when it comes to AI agents. So right now, at this point of time, at least I'm not familiar with any security solution that is able to monitor and to categorize and to analyze in runtime what types of agents are running on your machine, on your employees' machines. So we might be able to review LangChain applications or Crew AI or whatever agent frameworks applications in production environments and people that produce software, but for the things running in the computer, so we don't have any comprehensive solutions when it comes to it. So there is this side where you can't really govern it, and unless your company is very restrictive, that is, it won't allow you even to run it as a process because it's not from a verified installer. So we won't be at a place where it can be at least ran officially. But I think as time goes by, so there are many more solutions, like for example to run OpenClaw in its own VPS and to give it its own sandbox and its own environment. So it is it is a step towards making it more a bit more safe and a bit more less security hazard. But there are a lot of things which can go wrong with those sandboxes and containers. And I think there was a research from Wiz where they find multiple VPS instances which are totally exposed, and people can simply go and log in and do things. And it really boils down to the very end user who's using it. And unfortunately, and in the age of AI, it looks like that there isn't any that the security threshold has really degraded. So people have no problem connecting AI agents to anything, to their Gmail, to their WhatsApp, to their email accounts. And this is something which is on one side is good because it really helps on innovation. It's helped to find use cases and to really leverage those, but it's really, really dangerous.
Yeah, no. And what I'm hearing is, looking back, 2023 was the year, you could call it the AI wrapper. 2024, I feel was really focused on tooling and function calls, things like that. Basically where you give the LLM the ability to use things outside of just the model. Right, 2025, I feel we saw a lot of this multimodal type impact, right? Nano Banana came out from Google DeepMind, Sora from OpenAI, and you saw video and image sort of enter the arena. And it seems that this year, right, people really want autonomous AI agents or workers in the background. But it seems you can't have that conversation without security, right? And I am curious for you, what would you recommend? Because I feel security is one of those things that people don't really think about, especially when you're vibe coding. It's not fun to think about, right? How can they actually even learn how to make AI applications secure?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think as time goes by, the security concerns, people are more into this. And there are more best practices and more research around the topics. So I think first things is to know that dealing with LLMs, it's a new attack surface. It's a new attack vector. So the first thing to know is that dealing with LLMs, it opens us to new attack vectors. So the attack surface we had before really, really widened. Because we introduced this LLM, which doesn't receive only code or SQL queries. It receives text in natural language. So it really increases the modality of everything. And also it receives multimodal, like images, like videos, like MP3 files, and it also outputs every one of those modalities. So as far as domains of input and output to this black box, so we are much more exposed, and this invites to lots of security risks. Now, depending on which type of application you're going to be implementing, you have different security best practices. So, for example, if you take a RAG application, simple RAG application over a data store of maybe a company and its policies, for example. So if you take a RAG application, there are two steps you need to do. You need to first go and you need to index the data source and to put it into a vector store or any kind of store that you'll be able to retrieve it. And in the application itself, you would need to go and able to retrieve the relevant information. So you need access to this vector store. Now, each one of those steps has its own security risks. So for example, during the ingestion, if we take from the ingestion, we take things from the users. You take information from users, then you have to inspect it. You need to make sure that the user is not giving you something which you don't want to, some prompt injections, some malicious, things that is going to poison the context. This is one thing. And depending on the type of formats you're using, for example, if you're loading JSON files or YAML files, there are many open source packages like Pickle, for example, which are prone to deserialization as attacks. And if you're not careful during this step of the pipeline, you can find yourself executing some arbitrary malicious code, right? And then after you index, you need to make sure that if you're indexing if you're indexing information of your users, you need to be able to segment it, and you need to do it during the indexing time. So when you're going to retrieve the information, you're first going to filter by the user ID, maybe by the organization, so you can later enable role-based access control. Right. So this is only, and this is just the beginning of the ingestion pipeline. And during the retrieval pipeline, so during the retrieval, so first of all, to inspect the user's query, to inspect the documents that you retrieve, to see that sometimes people can poison the documents, and you are going to get a poison document, which is going to poison the context, and it's going to lead to bad things, right? And to check role-based access control before you even return the question to the LLM, just to make sure that you do not have any exploited information of users that you do not want to have leaked, right? And we can go and talk about it for an hour, and this is just for reg applications, And okay, so you have reg application and you have agents. And with agents, which can also have reg tools when you execute them. So with agents, it's really it's really first starting with your use case, and I think to keep a security hygiene, which is good, you first need to start by narrowing down everything and start giving more permissions to the agent as you need them, right? So, for example, your agent is going to be running somewhere, maybe on Kubernetes or maybe on serverless, for example, Cloud Run. So it's going to be running, let's say, on Google Cloud with a service account. This service account has permissions to do things in the cloud. It can maybe go to buckets. It can maybe go to Cloud SQL, maybe to Firestore. So you need to give, a custom service account with custom permissions to do that. So just as in the infra level, if God forbid, your AI agent gets hacked and gets compromised, then the blast radius is going to be much less, right? So if we have an agent that is running in a service account, and that service account doesn't really have access to anything in the cloud IAM, it's not that of a big deal, right? But if it has access to create machines, then you're inviting yourself to, to start some crypto mining things. So this is one thing with the agents, to secure the workload they're running inside them. And the other is the tools that your agent has. So OpenClaw, for example, or Claude Code, those agent harnesses, which are so powerful, they're so powerful because they have shell access. So they can write and they can execute code. And writing and executing code is actually the definition of remote code execution. So that's why I said it's a double-edged sword, because that's what makes them so powerful, is this ability. But this ability is also very dangerous. And in fact, if you're going to be using frameworks like LangChain, they would, if you're going to be using a shell tool, they would explicitly say that, hey, this is dangerous. You should be very careful when using it.
Yeah. No, it's a lot. I think what I'm hearing is security requires discipline, right? It requires you to be aware that define your attack vectors, meaning anything in the input or output, anytime you're transferring data, be aware that that's a potential attack vector, right? And make the right decisions, and also keep least privileges of everything, right? I know things like OpenClaw may be enticing to just give it access to everything. Unless your use case really requires it, just do the minimum, right? And then expand and increase the scope. And I think it's similar to what we said right earlier. It's if you're not comfortable handing your laptop to someone and giving that equivalent access,
it's a good
maybe
analogy.
Just be aware, right? Be aware that you're giving that. But, I get it. I think there's a lot of FOMO of not being able to build, because if you limit too much, then, it's a tricky thing that I think the industry's still figuring out. It seems like this year is probably the most important year to figure out, just because now things are growing at such a crazy rate. I want to talk a little bit about your background, if we sort of just pivot a little. I know you came from Orca Security before coming at Google. I would love to hear more your journey from sort of being a hardcore backend security person to now, being at least one of the people I go to at Google when it comes to anything LLMs?
Yeah, actually, so what we see right now in the industry is that people going to AI engineering is usually divided into two personas, right? So you have on the one hand, you have personas who are backend developers or full stack developers, but engineers who write code for production and know what it's like to ship production code that sees customers and with all that it comes with, with logging, monitoring, tracing, and on calls, and jumping on a bug at 2 a.m. when everything is crashing, and incidents, and all of this pressure. So this is one side. This is one type of folks who are going into AI engineering, and on the other end you have data science, data analytics personnel who were up until now were more into data processing, maybe training models. And not working in production environments, but more heavy into research, exploring, really good with, with data, with structuring data, with preparing models and training data sets and evaluations, and very into research, right? And you see those two combine into like one role of AI engineer. And right now, by the way, I think at least in Israel, where I live, and seeing, meeting with people across the industry, you really see that it's really being commoditized. So your everyday dev or your everyday data science really know what is RAG, what are agents, how to use Claude Code, and how to use Gemini CLI, and really how to push the boundaries and how to get the most out of them, right? So I came from the developer side, right? So, so for me, to go into it, because when you think about it, building an application, it's still an application. So you need to know how to ship it, you need to know how to monitor it, and you need to know how it runs. And it's an application that uses an LLM, but it's still an application. So this was for me, and for me, the journey was, I was lucky enough simply to run up, actually, to find out about LangChain from a friend of mine, by the way. From a friend of mine, Shai Alon. He also works at Google. At the time, he was working at Orca Security as well. But he said, like, hey, there is this open source framework. It looks really, really cool. So you should really check it out. So I played around with it, and I immediately, I fell in love, and I really saw the problem it was solving. And I was lucky enough, I think at the time it was like, it had like 100 stars on GitHub. So it was really...
Oh, you were early adopter.
Yeah, it was very, very early. So I think by that time, I just jumped on the train on the right time, and was lucky enough to get my hands dirty, and since then, it's been learning gradually. Every time there is something new. So I think I was lucky enough to really jump on this train early, and I really had a chance to see this, transformation from how did this field started, with flaky agents that, run every second time you you run them, who break every time you run them, to really robust systems who actually that can actually do very useful things.
No, yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting to see. I feel you, looking back at 2023, I think the demos that you saw back then, right? It's crazy to think that they were impressive.
Exactly.
I saw a demo of, before Lovable became a company, they had an open source called GBT Engineer, and I think you could still look at it at GitHub. I think this was in 2024. All it is a CLI terminal where it asks you questions, and it produces the demo is making a snake game. It doesn't provide a UI for the snake game, it just gives you the code. But this demo, that's all it did, and you're smiling, right? Because that's so simple. 2 years later, 3 years later from that point in time. Like how I think there's a lot that people, sadly, who weren't maybe working with AI agents or just LLMs in 2023, 2024, that you sort of lose, right? Because you didn't see the beginnings of it. And like going back, what are some of the lessons that you learned the most right away in 2023, 2024, like in the early days?
I think that the biggest lesson is that you need to treat it like an application, like a regular application you would write without any
Mm-hmm.
without any AI, without any LLMs, and you need to treat it the same. So you need to go and you need to build a testing pipeline. And now the testing comes to a question, how do you do that, right? So maybe do
Mm-hmm.
you use an LLM in your testing pipeline? Maybe you mock something, but really, you really need to have the same software development life cycle, or a very similar software development life cycle as you would need to a regular application. So this is the first thing. And I think the second thing is that I think labeling data and labeling runs of executions and trajectories of agents is something which is really, really important that a lot of people are not doing by default. And I think this is something which is very easy to do, to tag a run if it's good or if it's bad. And later it's going to be very useful when you start go to evaluate your agents, and you want to start an evaluation pipeline, or you want to go and to fine tune your prompt and to see that you're backwards compatible. So I think this is like one of the things that you can do right now when developing the application, which is going to be very useful in the future.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think going back to your comment was you were one of the first 100 to star LangChain, right? I feel they should give you a little award for that. That's pretty impressive. So you've seen the space, grow in the last 3-ish years. Maybe a thought experiment for you. If you were to start from scratch and actually dive into learning how to build these AI systems, how would you go about that?
Yeah, I think the problem today for people who learn how to use those systems is that a lot of them use the abstractions. So I
Mm-hmm.
think LangChain, by the way, was one of the first to create those kinds of abstractions to create an agent. People, at least at one point of time, the community had a bit of criticism that there is way too
Yeah.
much abstractions and people did not know what was going on under the hood. Even though they could simply click and see the function implementation, but and then they would see. But it wasn't they weren't giving you building blocks at least. And since
Mm-hmm.
then, the LangChain ecosystem has changed a lot, and you really now have all the components that they have, and you can really build everything from scratch. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the number one advice is for people starting now is to always ask the question of how does it work? Okay, how is this happening? How is the LLM is able to decide which tool to call, for example?
Mm-hmm.
And for example, this example is it goes until it goes way back into the React prompt. I think back in 2022 from the reasoning
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
acting paper. I think was Stanford and some researcher from Google. So I think it goes back way then, but it all boils down to a prompt that goes to the LLM and some parsing later. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and once you understand this, you would really know the limitations of what you're working with or what you're building. And it's one thing to know how to use that technology and how maybe to build with it, but it's a different layer of depth if you understand how it's built, and even more why it's built and why were certain decisions made and why. And this is why I feel lucky enough to be just in the right place in the right time, and to really see all the evolutions of those frameworks and really see what kind of iterations they did and what changed and what it was solving.
Yeah.
So I think this is my message here.
Yeah. No, You are reminding me of uh, sort of another expert, Kelsey Hightower, right, on the Kubernetes side of, I think he made a famous GitHub repo of like how to learn Kubernetes the hard way. And I genuinely believe learning how to build AI systems the hard way or agentic AI or Gen AI applications the hard way is really crucial to actually knowing the limitations of them, right? So it sounds that there's a way to sort of cheat your way into like learning the hard ways. Just ask, maybe even the LLM itself, why does these abstractions work? Why were these decisions even made? And then two, just give a sanity check if this is an attack vector on the security side, because I think that's also probably equally, if not more important nowadays.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
that's,
And when working with open source, you can't expect open source to do your security. This is something which needs to come from the person who develops the application. So the open source, they can do the best thing they can do, but it all boils down to how you use. So if you build a website with Django and you expose it to the internet, then you need to know that lots of people are going to play with it, and also malicious actors. So same things with LangChain or any other framework, open source.
yeah, and especially with OpenClaw, right? I know even the creator of that, it's a side project. There was no expectation for it to grow at the speed that it did, and security wasn't top of mind because it's more of a, hey, is this cool? And the world said, yes, this is cool. We want it now. So now I
Yeah,
feel security
totally.
obviously, is being a bigger focus. Um, what are your thoughts in general for vibe coding? Specifically, what would you recommend in an ideal like golden state, sort of the environment that people should be playing in? Are you sort of team IDE, team CLI?
I think both. Yeah, so I don't like to be restricted to only IDE, only CLI. Sometimes it's useful to be in an IDE. Sometimes in the CLI it's faster. But I think when vibe coding, I think the most important thing is to make sure that first of all, to understand what you write or what the AI writes, um, and to read to read the code, or at least to skim over it.
Yeah.
I have actually a really funny story. I have a friend of mine who is very straight out of college, and
Okay.
right now looking into jobs. And
Hmm.
job market right now is not that sympathetic. It's not that
Yeah.
uh, it's not that good for new grads, because AI can do a lot of things that you would give junior developers.
Hmm.
Anyways, a friend of mine, they started vibe coding an application and they showed me it, and then I started asking questions. So how did you do that? How does this work?
Yeah.
And they really didn't know how it was built. And I think to go into this mode where you just vibe code and you don't even look at the code, and you this you just go, you vibe it. It's something which is really bad, because you do not learn anything. So I
Hmm.
think when vibe coding, or I like to call it agentic coding, using agentic tools to write software, you would want to make everything as robust as possible. So for example, if you implement a feature, then you need to implement tests for this feature. And actually, I'm quite surprised that I haven't anything really. Um, we haven't really seen, like, for me it feels really natural to go to TDD, to test driven
Hmm.
development when it comes. And I really don't see it a lot, at least online, of people
Yeah.
doing it, and sharing all the tests, and how did they create first the tests, or even created the tests after they implemented the feature. Because when you're in the enterprise, when you're developing software that goes to production, at least in companies that value their product, There isn't any pull request that comes in that does not have any tests in it, you know. And I think with vibe coding and with agentic coding, we're really starting to, you know, because we can ship so much faster and we can build and code so much faster, I think testing is something that is a bit forgotten, but is very, very important.
Yeah, I feel what some people are doing for tests is just telling the AI, hey, can you fix this? Right? Want something, it's very reactive, but it becomes an issue at scale if you're pushing more lines of code, right? Eventually, you're going to have just so many little issues emerge that now you need AI just to sort of fix it. And I think there's also this strong appetite or hunger of hopefully AI smart enough at one point that you don't have to write tests. Do you think that's somewhere we're headed, realistically?
I think that as far as it comes to code that AI produces, even the state-of-the-art coding agents, the code that they produce is actually quite mediocre, and I think it's reasonable because they probably train on data from public open source repositories from GitHub. And, you know, the code on GitHub is not that good. I mean, I think there is there's distribution of, of which language, how is the code of, for example, in Java, the code on GitHub might be a bit better than JavaScript, for example. And I think that the code that the best coding agents today, they produce is okay. I mean, it's okay. I think the key advantage is that they can produce massive amounts of code. And I think that in order to make that the code of higher quality, you would need iterations, right? And I think we're starting to see harnesses on top of those coding agents, on top of Claude Code, on Gemini CLI, Cursor CLI. We're starting to see agent harnesses on top of them, who are going to make the quality of the code better with writing tests, with writing better coding conventions. So I think we are going towards this, but it's not something which is out of the box. It's like an iterative process where after it's hooks that after you produce the code, you have another agent which criticizes it and, pushes it to its better, just like having, a buddy in the gym pushing you to do a bunch of more weight.
Yeah. No, that's a perfect analogy. We have to play in that space correctly. One thing that I was thinking as you were talking about this is, given that you do have like a passion with open source, if you fast forward, sort of months, maybe even years from now, do you think that these AI agent vibe coding tools are going to have an impact in the open source community? One example, right?
In which community?
Is Tailwind, in open source community. So one example is Tailwinds, right? A common framework used to make sort of building nice UIs easier. In the age of Claude Code, Gemini CLI, all these tools, a lot of people aren't looking at their documentation as much, right? We're basically letting these agents abstract the need to even learn the syntax or to, digest these open source technologies. Do you see a negative impact in that in the future?
I'm familiar with the story on Tailwind. I think the impact is more going to be on the business side of things. So every open source technologies, it needs to have some kinds of business justifications, some business model that is going to drive revenue. And with Tailwind, I think it was like their premium support and premium documentation. But the fact that AI can just regurgitate, this is the word, regurgitate?
Regurgitate? Yeah.
Maybe.
I like the way you say it better, though.
And it can simply digest, this documentation like that, and you don't really need to know the syntax. So I think it really, killed this business model. But I think other open source, so for example, if you take Pydantic, they have a Logsfire. and LangChain, they have LangSmith, so and their agent deployment runtime. So I think it's going to change a bit the business models, right? And
Yeah.
we're definitely going to see less and less business models that are going to be relying on documentation or any other kinds of things like that. This for sure.
It does seem too that even the way open source technology is being designed and created is changing. I'm curious if you agree that now open source has to cater to AI agents, like things like Claude Code or Gemini CLI. What are some of the changes that you have seen that now open source is changing to better, work with
Oh,
AI coders versus human coders?
yeah, totally. And it's seeing right now every open source framework that wants to be used
Yeah.
by AI agents, and they have lots of motivations to do so.
Hmm.
So they would want to make it accessible to do the AI agents for free. Okay,
Yeah.
so for
Yeah.
example, and I think LangChain actually were one of the first ones. They added something to their documentation which is called llm.txt. So it's
Mm.
basically a text file in their base URL, which the AI agent can scrape, can download. It's very digestible for an LLM, and it has the index of every page in their documentation or in their website and with information. And if an agent wants to do an agentic search to search about a term of how to do something in this framework, they have a really easy time to do it, right? So this is like one thing that they did. Another thing that I cite was just recently they added for each page in their documentation, they added a copy, to copy text button to simply dump it into your IDE or to your terminal,
Mm.
Gemini CLI, whatever. But more
Hmm.
than that, they even created, and this is I see a lot, many open source do, they create an MCP server, okay, a public MCP server free, which you can simply connect to your coding agent, and boom, you have a coding agent with the best practices and with access
Yeah.
to the top of the notch and latest documentation, which is one of the problems with coding agents, because that the ones who use raw data and their training data, they don't have access to the latest versions of the libraries, and those libraries, they change very, very often.
Yeah.
So I think like they would want to create an interface to do those AI agents to go and promote them and to do it well, because they wouldn't want any coding agent that is going to write bad code with them. So
Yeah. No, that's really cool because also I feel, you know, the biggest, most successful coding agents in maybe the first few years when LLMs came out were um the first, best AI agents were obviously coding agents, right? Because there's a lot of
yes.
utility. It's very easy to see the value. And developers tend to be the first adopters of any new technology. But I think you mentioning that essentially now people are writing code so that AI agents could consume it a lot easier. I feel that's a signal that maybe other industries you're going to start seeing that, right? Anything that's being built maybe in healthcare or in fintech and in all these different industries, you're going to start to see more catering to these AI agents.
And we're seeing right now a lot of. I think it's a feeling that people are building the internet for agents
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning. So, for example, when OpenClaw came out, I think it was called Notebook, and then you have Rent a Human, and you have lots of these cool projects, for AI agents, maybe Tinder for AI agents, all of those funny stuff. So I think. It's really interesting to see, but I think we're definitely going into this direction where we have another a kind of entity that we need to cater to.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel before, right, all we were really doing is converting ones and zeros for humans to be able to understand it, right? Now we're converting one to zeros for humans to understand, then converting it back so that AI agents could understand. And maybe we're going to be abstracted away at some point and just have agents talk to computers. I'm curious, in your perspective, right? Do you have any like predictions that what we'll see in like the end of 2026?
I think 2026 is going to be the year of the agent harnesses. So it's going to be layers on top of those LLMs, which are very, very opinionated, but they can solve a certain type of tasks very, very well. For example, Claude Code is agent harness for coding tasks on top of Anthropic's models. Gemini CLI for same thing for Google's models. So I think those agent harnesses are getting much more advanced every day that passes. And I think that this is something which is right now is on still in research. But I think that the ability of agents to dynamically learn and to improve over time, it's something that we're going to be seeing this year. And this is very, very achievable with the skills mechanism because skills are simply text files. So if you theoretically add reflection step after a couple of turns or at any given point of time that you define to reflect and to rewrite the skill again according to the new findings, you can find yourself having this improvement. Yes, it does introduce many questions like, okay, so on which scope I'm going to learn is going to be in the user scope, in the users of the sessions, or maybe of a bunch of users collectively learning. So it really opens up a lot of questions, but it's something which I think in 2026 it's going to be really, really implemented and adopted. Because this is really the future. Because when we humans, when we do things, we learn on the go, and when we get input and information, and we get feedback, and we practice it, then we get better. So it should be the same for agent as well. And I think it's just a matter of time until this kind of thing is fully formalizes it and have like a really quality implementation of this kind of technology. And I think with coding agent, you can see this feedback very fast because you can see this code. You can analyze it. You can run tooling to check this quality of this code. The ecosystem is prepared as far as tooling to do these kinds of works, to analyze and to assess maybe quality of the code, of how to do things.
What excites you the most for 2026 in this world of AI building?
I think what excites me the most is that it's being commoditized in a way I haven't really imagined. And the more people going into coding right now is really, really, it has a lot of good implications. Because you get now different mindsets and different things that usually people in engineering, maybe qualities that they did not have, or things that they did not think of, or use cases that they did not imagine that can be solved even, or they simply weren't interested in. So I think this is one of the things I'm excited about.
I can't agree with you more. One thing I've always enjoyed, so I've been selling, AI to startups since I joined Google in 2020. But I feel 2025, I started seeing, it's not my favorite term, but let's say like non-engineering people. One, I feel they're starting to think more like engineers, right? They're starting to see the computer more as a tool, as a way, I could make my life easier by automating these things. But two is sort of the ideas, right? Ideas from people that aren't in this sort of tech bubble that you and I are part of. I'm curious, have you seen any ideas that someone that maybe doesn't come from a traditional, SWE background, or isn't maybe non-technical, but building something that you're like, wasn't expecting that?
I think, I think the narrative and the how people are becoming more technical, you can really see this around product. And I really see a lot of product people, maybe there's this new role, AI product manager, that are doing really, really deep engineering work when it comes to evaluating those kinds of systems, which actually surprised me. So I did encounter a couple of that where I was having conversations with a product personnel, and I wasn't expecting them to be that technical, even more technical than me in some areas. So this is
Yeah.
something which was really interesting to see.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I think I'll leave you off with one last question. I think everyone is overwhelmed with keeping up to date with all things AI, right? From the training inferencing side to like building LLM apps, LLM applications, security. Like, what is your simple way of consuming information just to stay up to date?
Yeah, so we all know the ex post of Andrei Karpathy, right?
Yeah,
So
that's a must.
The FOMO is real, right?
Hmm.
And also I'm witnessing it, and I'm feeling it as well. Um, Even though I'm perceived as somebody, who knows, the latest and greatest, and really keeping up with the newest tech. I think what I found most useful is of course, to be on X every time I have. But I think the real, and this is actually a skill that is developed, is the way to see something new, to first understand what problem does it solve, and then if it interests you, then maybe you go and you learn it, and you dive deep, you play with it. But first, to make sure that you understand what problem does it solve, and don't go to use something just because everybody is going
Hmm.
and learning about it. And I think like there is a lot of noise right now in the industry, by the way, and a lot of noise on Twitter and on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And in fact, I saw various LinkedIn posts of people, saying, "Wow, I built these amazing things with OpenClaw." And when you look at it, it was, just clickbait, and it wasn't really something very impressive.
Yeah.
And, OpenClaw just made me $200,000 or something like that. So I think like there is lots of noise out there, and I think like just like when people, I think just people need to have the ability to see a post and to, it's just like sensing, okay, is this, hype, or it's something worth, checking and studying, and if this is something real, and at least for me, every post that I see, I have the question that I'm asking myself: is it worth for me to invest my time to learn it, or is it okay for me just to understand what problem that it solves and move on? You know, so this is what I do. It works okay for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, at at the at the bottom line, we have a finite number of time we can invest to learn and to educate ourselves and to try new things. And we need to make sure that we don't go into this rabbit hole of learning things that are not important, So this is at least what I think. What do you
Yeah.
think?
No. Well, one, I'm very glad you said that you have FOMO as well, because I'll be honest, I do message you at work whenever I have questions. So you are my, I cache a lot of what I think I need to learn with you. Um, so it feels like you could always be learning, and I think your recommendation is actually something I'm going to take. Focus on why things are built, right? And yeah, you're always going to hear these noise of people trying to get attention, like, but really knowing why something was built. I don't know about you. I cannot stay up 24/7 like an LLM. So
Yeah,
focusing
yeah,
your
me too.
time is really important. No, well,
Me
Ed, and
too.
I really appreciate you taking the time. I learned a lot. I think you have a lot to offer in terms of pragmatic ways to just focus on building LLMs. And I think giving us a window of what you've learned from like literally day one almost. And one thing I'd say and recommend you to shout out is say that you are one of the first 100 GitHub stars on LangChain, because that's a pretty big achievement.
All right, all right. Thank you so much for the invitation, Abe. It was a pleasure, as
Yeah,
always.
no, we'll talk soon. Take care, Ed.
Thank you. Bye bye.